everybody, it's Miss Lauren here at the Medina branch of the Medina County District Library. I am really glad to be back with you again today for another fun Saturday STEM experiment. Today we're going to be making DIY lava lamps. So we're going to be using some materials that we already have at home to make a cool science experiment talking more about chemical reactions. Side note, if you haven't had a chance yet, Miss Gail did some fizzy fun science experiments. She did this last month. So if you haven't checked it out yet, be sure to jump over to our YouTube page, look for the Fizzy Fun video by Miss Gail, and do some more science experiments and talk more about chemical reactions. So, lava lamps. I hope some of you have seen them before. Maybe some of you have had them in your homes, but they are really cool. And today we're just going to be taking some pretty standard materials and ingredients and making our own. So we're going to cut to a screen. I took a picture of all the materials that you're going to need, in addition to water. That's another important part. And we'll get started. I'm going to show you step by step how to make it on your own, and then we're going to talk about the cool science that's happening behind it. So first things first, you're going to start with a water bottle. So I am reusing this recycled bottle, plastic bottle from my iced tea. You can use whatever you have at home, an empty water bottle, or another great option would be a clear mason jar. So I know lots of us have mason jars at home. This is another great option. Essentially, you're going to want anything that is clear so you can see through it, and so you can see the chemical reaction happening, and anything with a lid. That's also really important. You are going to want to put a cap on this because you're going to want to tilt it and kind of look at the lava lamp as the reaction is happening. So we've got our water bottle. Make sure that it's clean and dry. You don't want any iced tea left over in your bottle to mess up any of the chemical reactions. So make sure it's clean, it's dry. And then go ahead and grab your vegetable oil. So this is something pretty common in a lot of our pantries at home. Our adults at home typically will have this or something similar. So if you don't have vegetable oil, you could also try it with canola oil or baby oil, whatever cooking oils you might have in the pantry. But we're going to start with our vegetable oil. So I'm going to uncap this. I should also mention, because we're doing a science experiment, right? And science can get a little bit messy sometimes. It is a great idea to cover your table or whatever surface you're working on. So maybe throw down a tablecloth, maybe put some newspapers down. Also, not a bad idea to have paper towels handy, because scientists sometimes we spill, right? And sometimes we make a mess, which is fine. It's part of the process. But just make sure you have a few things on hand just in case it does get a little bit messy. Okay, so we've got our water bottle, and I'm also going to grab a funnel. This isn't 100% necessary. You don't have to have one if it's not something you have at home. It just does tend to help make the pouring a little bit easier, so it's not quite as messy. So we're going to take our vegetable oil, and we're going to fill the bottle about 2/3 of the way. You don't have to measure this. It is not that exact. Just kind of eyeball it. We'll pour this in. Keep an eye on it. That looks about good, right? That's about enough oil. So we've got about half, almost 2/3, which is perfectly fine. Okay, so we've got our oil. The next thing that's going to happen, we're going to add some water. So go ahead, and I'm going to keep my funnel in there just because it makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to pour our water. And something interesting is going to happen. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. You're going to want to make sure you leave at least an inch or two at the top. Leave some wiggle room, and don't fill the bottle the entire way up. So we've got our oil, we've got our water, and I do want to show you what's happening because this is kind of part of the process. There's a little bit of science happening now too. So hopefully you can see it. But you can see what's happening is the oil is staying on top. So the vegetable oil is on the top, and my water is sinking towards the bottom. Do you know why that is? Can you take a guess as to why that might happen? So even though I poured the water in second, you might think, well, if I put the water in second on top of the oil, it's going to stay at the top, right? Not the case. So water is actually more dense than your vegetable oil. So what that means is the water basically weighs more, right? So that water, even though it was put in second, even though it's the top layer of our two liquids, it's going to sink to the bottom because it doesn't weigh. It weighs more, right? The oil doesn't weigh as much. Your water is more dense, which means you can kind of see it's going to separate and your water is going to fall to the bottom. So this part of the experiment is going to take just a bit of time. Let your water kind of settle. You want to have a nice layer, a nice separation between the two layers there, okay? You can kind of see what's happening. Okay. So after you've got your water and your oil, the next thing we're going to do is to choose some food coloring. I'm going to get my green food coloring here. Really important to note, you do not need a ton. You only want a few drops of food coloring. I know it's really tempting to put a whole bunch in there, but only a few drops will do. I'm only going to put probably 3 drops into my bottle here. So I've got 1, 2, 3. So something else kind of cool is you can't really see it real great in my bottle, but if you look at your lava lamp, you might notice that the food coloring is just kind of hanging out on that layer right between the oil and the water. And eventually in our experiment, you're going to see it's going to combine and it might drop down. So you got your food coloring. This next part is also completely optional. I've got glitter, so you don't need a ton. I promise. You're going to want to put a ton of glitter in there. You want to put a ton of glitter all the time everywhere, but you only need a little spoonful. Again, you don't have to do this part. Just kind of adds another fun element to it. I'm going to take just a little spoon, just a little spoonful of glitter. Maybe just a little more. And we're going to put that on top. And then we're going to cap the glitter really tight because we don't want this spilling all over the floor. So cap this, put it to the side, and now you're going to kind of see, hopefully you can see it, my glitter is just sort of falling in clumps down through the oil until it gets again to that nice layer between the water and the oil. It's just kind of hanging out with the food coloring. All right, so we've got all of our materials, we've got everything in our lava lamp. The last piece is to add our Alka-Seltzer tablets. So these tablets are what make the magic happen. This is what causes the chemical reaction into our lava lamp. I'm going to open this up. Inside, the packet that I have has 2 tablets inside. You only need 1 to start off with, and you're going to break this tablet up into a few smaller pieces. 3 or 4 small pieces will do just fine. You don't want to drop this whole tablet into your lava lamp. It'll just be too much of a reaction. So go ahead and break this up into smaller pieces. Okay, so just small little pieces like that, 3 or 4 pieces. And then you're ready to drop it in and see what happens. What do you think is going to happen? Take a second, think about it, make a hypothesis. Scientific term, what do you think is going to happen when I drop in the Alka-Seltzer tablet? You ready? Look at that. Do you see what's happening? So that tablet fell to the bottom, and now look at all of those bubbles. Look at that happening. Can you see it? See all those bubbles moving around. It's catching that food coloring. Very cool. If you listen, you can even hear the chemical reaction happening. You can hear it bubbling and fizzing up. So what's happening? What is this? We know it's a chemical reaction because I've said it a couple of times, but what's actually making this reaction happen? What's making this lava lamp work right now? So these are the magic, right? The Alka-Seltzer tablets are what make the magic happen, and that's because of what the Alka-Seltzer tablets are made out of. So they're made of sodium bicarbonate, which is just a really fancy way of saying baking soda, and citric acid. And so that baking soda and that citric acid, when they combine and when they hit that water, that's when the chemical reaction happens. So that's when those 2 elements hit the water, and then that chemical reaction is creating these bubbles. So you can kind of see all that fizzing and bubbling that's happening. That's carbon dioxide. That's a gas. So you've got your sodium bicarbonate your baking soda, and your citric acid, and they hit the water, your chemical reaction, it creates carbon dioxide or gas bubbles, right? So you can take another tablet. Now that you know what's happening, drop that in. Can you see? So then you've got your carbon dioxide, you've got that gas, that chemical reaction that's happening, and all of that gas is being pushed up through the bottle because it wants to escape. So your gas is going to escape up towards the top of your bottle, and in the meantime, it's pushing through that water. It's pushing through the layer of water up through the vegetable oil, and it's trapping the food coloring, and that's why you can see the colorful bubbles moving up and moving up towards the top, and then that gas is being released, and that drops the color back down, and it starts the process all over again. Can you see what's happening? So what's happening in your lava lamp? Is that the same thing that's happening to you? Are you seeing all of these bubbles come up? Very cool. So the other neat thing is this is a chemical reaction that can just keep happening over and over again. So as soon as you see that the fizzing kind of stops, you can just drop in another piece of your Alka-Seltzer tablet. Okay, so final thought, make sure you put your cap on, okay? So you wanna make sure that your cap is on nice and tight because sometimes it's kind of fun. Sort of tilt it, right? And see what happens. But you wanna make sure that cap is on nice and tight because we don't want this to spill and you want to keep your lava lamp, right? Because you can keep having that reaction happen over and over again. Okay. So I'm also going to do a second project. It's not necessarily a science experiment, but it is pretty cool and it does use a lot of the same materials you already have out for your lava lamp. So go ahead, set this to the side, hang tight, and I'm going to be right back showing you another project that's pretty cool using oil and water. All right? Hi everybody. Okay, so we're back. We just finished making our really cool DIY lava lamps. So if you haven't caught that part of the video, back up just a bit. But I told you that after the little break, we were going to do another project. So it's not necessarily a science experiment. It is still talking about liquid density, but it uses most of the same materials that we already had to make our DIY lava lamps. So I've already got myself set up here. What I have in my jar, again, you want something that's clear so you can kind of see the cool thing that's about to happen. I've got my jar and I've just put a little bit of baby oil into my jar. So we're still talking about, you know, water versus oil and liquid density. So what I opted to do was choose baby oil because it's clear. And because we're working with colors and colorful water, the clear just tends to show up a little bit better. But again, you can use whatever you have at home. So we've got baby oil, clear baby oil in our center jar. And then around it, all I've done is filled up each of these little jars with water and food coloring. And I've just, you have little liquid droppers and pipettes, and I've just mixed in some water with some food coloring. That's all I've done. So I've got my green, I've got a cool teal, I've got some purple and some pink and a really dark purple over here. So when we talked about our lava lamps, we talked about the reason that the water and the oil separate, right? They don't get along. They don't necessarily like each other, they don't get along, and they're always separating. So they're never gonna mix together unless you add dish soap, but that's a whole other topic. They're gonna separate, and that's because they're different densities. Basically what that means is they weigh different amounts, right? So you've got your oil on the top, and you've got your water on the bottom because your water is more dense. And that means it's always going to sink to the bottom. So what I thought we could do was try a little bit of an experiment with our colorful water and see what happens when we drop it into the baby oil. So knowing that water and oil don't always mix, they tend to stay separated, what do you think is going to happen? Make your hypothesis, your guess. Think about what you think is going to happen. You got it? You got your hypothesis? Okay, so I'm going to start off here. I've got my teal. I'm going to take some teal water, and again, make sure that your surfaces are covered. You want to make sure that in case there's any spills, because that happens sometimes in science, that everything is protected and covered, and make sure you've got some paper towels handy. So we've got our colorful water, and all I'm going to do is do a drop. And I do another drop. What do you see is happening? When I drop in the water into my jar, do you see how it stays down there kind of like a bead? Let's try it again. Can you see it? And it just sort of falls. So look at your jar or your glass, whatever it is that you're using. And that's kind of it. But we're still talking about how the liquids are different densities, and so your colorful water is just going to sink to the bottom, right? But it's kind of fun, and it's kind of cool to see how many different drops you can get down there and keep them separated and just keep dropping them in. So adults at home, if you're doing this project, this is especially great for little ones because you're talking about color, and sometimes it's just fun to watch those drops come to the bottom. So all of the experiments here are for different ages, and you just keep dropping it in. So then try it with a different color. What about adding my fun pink color over here? They're like little beads of water. Okay, and because your water weighs less, it's going to try and sink to the bottom. And so at the end, after you've done a bunch of little drops, make sure to gently drop them one by one. You're going to have all of these different colors. Can you see it? On the bottom of your jar. So just keep going. Let's pause and see how many drops you can get at the bottom of your jar. Okay? So I'm going to pause, and you're going to keep dropping water. So how did you do? How many drops did you get to the bottom of your jar? It looks pretty cool, doesn't it? So what did we learn today? We talked about chemical reactions with our lava lamps. We talked about how the sodium bicarbonate, or the baking soda, and the citric acid react with the water to create that carbon dioxide, right? And make the bubbles, which kind of gives your bottle your lava lamp effect. And then we're talking about how different liquids weigh more, how some are more dense than others, and so they're going to react in different ways. Just like the water and oil is reacting in your jar with your baby oil, and just like it kept separated and reacted differently inside your lava lamp. So that's everything I have for you today, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me on another STEM Saturday. If you haven't had a chance yet, I've mentioned our YouTube channel. Be sure to jump over there. There's tons of videos on our YouTube. We are still trying to do so many virtual programs. We're bringing you different cooking demonstrations. We're bringing you story times. We are doing some Zoom programming too. So be sure to hop over to our website, mcdl.info. Check out our events page and be sure to register for some of those virtual online programs. I'm Miss Lauren from the Medina County District Library, and we'll see you next time. Bye!